Covered from preps to pros and everything in between. Now, let's go inside the Fox Sports 102.9 studio with Chase and Gerhard for WKXX Live.
We saw something last night I don't think any of us thought we would see. The biggest blowout, not only in championship game history, but in bowl game history. Georgia Bulldogs, the national champions. We will talk about it today. Welcome in on this Tuesday, the 10th day of January 2023. Chase Robinson here alongside Gerhard Mathangani. And we're excited to be with you today. We got a lot of college football to talk about as we have finished another season. We got to wait all the way till August 26th to see college football again as national championship last night. We'll talk some college basketball as well, some NFL talk on the way. Chris Gordy will join us coming up at 2:30. We've enjoyed talking with Chris all college football season. He is with the Locked On SEC podcast. He'll recap the national championship this season with us coming up at 2:30. So looking forward to that. We do welcome in your phone calls today. Your reaction to that national championship game last night. 256-413-1029. Again, that is 256-413-1029. Would love to hear your reaction to the blowout last night. If you missed our announcement on the show yesterday, we are in our final week of WKXX Live. Friday will be our last show. And as we move through the week, we'll have more announcements coming, more information coming on the future of 102.9 and what you'll be hearing. So be listening for that as we move through the week. But this is our final week of WKXX Live being on the air here from 2 to 4. And so we are going to enjoy being with you each and every afternoon. And we'll have our final show coming up on Friday. But again, would love to hear from you today, 256-413-1029. Gerhard, yesterday we said Georgia, both of us agreed Georgia would win.
Yeah.
We thought TCU would be much better. And let me say this off the top, because a lot of folks aren't giving TCU a lot of credit this morning and today. They won the games to get to this game.
Yeah.
They beat Michigan
right
to get to this game. But they were going to have to play an A++ game last night.
Mm-hmm.
And they did not at all. And Georgia did.
Yeah.
And, I thought maybe if Georgia, even if Georgia played a B- game, I thought they probably could win this game.
Yeah.
Georgia looked really good last night.
Yeah, they certainly did. This is a twofold thing where I get why people are upset, and we're hearing a lot of this talk, especially from Alabama fans, that TCU probably shouldn't have been in this game. And hindsight being 2020, it does look that way, and they were most definitely overmatched. To your point, they did win the games that they needed to win in order to get here. Now, people could say, hey, well, they looked a little susceptible throughout the course of the season, and they looked susceptible in the Big 12 championship game. Your eyes told you that this team didn't belong. A lot of people are saying that now, that their eyes are telling them, the eyes should have told the committee that this team didn't belong. Now, I do think it's a perfect storm of two different things. It's a perfect storm that Georgia did play probably its best game of the season, but I'm with you that they didn't have to play their best game of the season in order to win or blow this team out.
Yeah.
65-7. I don't think anybody saw the biggest lopsided win in bowl history, as you mentioned, not just in championship game history, in bowl history, but both things happened at the exact same time. Georgia played A++, and TCU picked the worst time to play their worst game. But being in this game, I didn't have that much beef in them being in this game. The only thing is that this better start to be a wake-up call to the committee. If you don't feel 100% that this team is in there, then don't put them in. But this team, in my opinion, deserved the right in order to play in the game. And college football, we got what we got last night.
I think whoever Georgia would have played last night, they would have beaten. That's just how they played
Yeah.
last night. And I know the committee didn't want Ohio State, Michigan again in the playoff. But I would have much rather had last night, the TCU Georgia, in a semifinal game in the Peach Bowl than on the big stage in Los Angeles in the national championship.
Right.
If they wanted TCU in, let's put TCU 4, Ohio State 3. We'll have Michigan, Ohio State winner gets Georgia in the national championship.
Yeah.
We would have had a much better game last night.
We certainly would have. And the metrics were telling you that a blowout was coming, because in every semifinal game so far, we've had at least one blowout. And when both semifinal games were to the wire games where TCU, keep in mind, TCU had a big lead on Michigan, and they had to hold on to win that game and say, okay, well, they ended up winning the football game. The Georgia-Ohio State game basically became the de facto national championship game.
Yeah.
We just didn't know it until a week later.
Right. Yeah, it's a good way to put it. But 65-7, and it could have been worse than that.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, the way Georgia played, and they were up big at halftime, but I thought, well, TCU has had moments where they've come back and I've been clutch at times. So I said, well, we'll see what happens to start the third quarter. And Georgia just comes out, foot down on the pedal and doesn't let up. But remarkable what we saw last night from Georgia.
Yeah, and I think a part of what led to the blowout was the fact, and you mentioned it, the fact that TCU was such a great second half team. This Georgia team was ready to make sure that they weren't going to be one of these comeback stories that TCU's had. They rewind back to the Kansas State game, the Baylor game in the middle of the year. The games that they had, all these tremendous comebacks. I think Georgia was just ready, number one, for the moment to get off to a fast start. But then also Georgia has something to prove as well in the second half and say, hey, we're not going to let this team come back and have any sense of hope here, whether it's late second quarter or into the second half. And they had the perfect leader in order to do so. Stetson Bennett, in my opinion, is the kind of perfect guy to be able to lead that charge, and he certainly did.
So last night, 65-7, as we said. So previously, before last night, the biggest kind of blowout in college football bowl game history was the 2018 Armed Forces Bowl. Army beat Houston 70-14. So the 58-point loss for TCU surpasses that last night. So I got a question. As I was looking through all these numbers and doing some research today, I came across this, and I want to give you a trivia question.
All right.
So we've been talking on the college ranks. What is the biggest blowout in Super Bowl history? Do you know?
Ooh. I know there was that one year where the Broncos lost by like 1 million. But I don't know if that got into the 50s or not. And also remember, I think it was Cam Newton's Carolina Panthers team also lost by a lot. I think it gets to, I think it was the Broncos. I think it was the Broncos, like 90s. I think somewhere in there.
It was 1990.
1990. Okay.
The 49ers beat the Broncos 55-10.
Wow. Yeah. So 45. I mean. This is 2 touchdowns better than that.
Yeah. So there's been some blowouts, but few and far between. Not only in the Super Bowl, but in the college football national championship as well. But Georgia, big win last night, 65-7, and back to back for Kirby Smart. And we'll get into more of the kind of the points of this team and this quarterback in the next segment, but. What Georgia was able to do, 15-0, back-to-back national championships. As David Pollack said at halftime, Georgia's owning college football right now.
Yeah, and he said that, and there's some TikTok videos going out about Nick Saban's response to that. He was sitting right next to him on the set as he was uttering those words. And there's some jokes out there that, hey, that's already playing in Alabama's team meetings and their weight room, and then that'll be the theme of the A-Day game going into the season. So far this year, there are a lot of really interesting and really great conversations. I know we'll dive into it. We'll probably have some callers diving into it as well about this Georgia team, about where this program is, where this team ranks in this. We've had a nice little history, nice little run of college football in the last maybe 5, 6, 7 years. Just incredible offenses, quarterbacks, defenses with Georgia last year and this year. To kind of frame it in the bigger picture where this Georgia team is, where this program is right now. I know we can't do it all, in this very second, but it's going to be really interesting because Georgia to me is this has solidified. We talked about this before, talked about this last week. This has solidified Georgia. This is not some flash in the pan nonsense. This is to me even maybe a clip better than when Clemson was just got over the hump and they were making their run as well. So this will be a really fun one to continue to monitor as we go on, because I think Kirby's built a monster.
He has, and we will continue breaking down the national championship win for Georgia last night and another championship for the SEC. We'll take your phone calls. Let's get your reaction in 256-413-1029 as we continue here on this Tuesday afternoon. We will be back with more in just a moment.
Not complete.
It is WKXX live here on Fox Sports 102.9 on this Tuesday afternoon, the day after the College Football Playoff National Championship. Would love to get your reaction from the Georgia beatdown inside SoFi Stadium last night, 256-413-1029. The way that stadium is, Gerhard, you know, it looks like a spaceship landed in the middle of Los Angeles, but you know, some of it is open, and apparently the poor TCU fans last night were getting rained on. If the night wasn't bad enough for them, just that one section of TCU fans was getting rained on.
It's almost like the sports guys were just like, you know what, Horned Frogs, you've had your day in the sun and it is now over. But you're right, because the way that stadium lays out, it is that way. And how about, I mean, it's just this weird time where in California, they are getting pounded right now with rain, which in some respects is good because in the mountainous areas, you're getting great snow. And the skiing up there is apparently ridiculously great right now, all in the northern part of California and in some of the mountains in Southern California. The bad part is the precipitation that gets down is all just rain, and they're not used to that. They're used to maybe 2 or 3 days of rain a year.
Yeah.
So imagine going from Dallas to LA where it doesn't rain ever, and then it rains. And you're in the one part of the stadium where you're getting rained on as your team is getting destroyed by the greatest margin in championship game history, college or pro. It just seems like an embarrassment of downfalls for TCU. But yeah, it was a really interesting situation as to pile it up, because then they had the camera shots where they were showing it, and you're like, oh, those poor guys. They haven't had enough already. They paid a lot of money for those tickets, and you know, here they are right now getting wet.
Yeah, and one shot, there was some folks on the field, and they were showing a shot, and you could see rain in the camera, but the people weren't getting wet. I mean, it was odd. Yeah, just the layout of that stadium, definitely the modern feel there at SoFi Stadium. But once again, we saw last night the SEC is the greatest conference of college football. What do you think that did to the Big 12? And we discussed this yesterday with Ryan Brown. We discussed it with Josh Neighbors from the Locked On Big 12 podcast last week, just what this game was going to do for the Big 12, because you do have TCU in there. Of course, Texas and Oklahoma will be exiting, so TCU could be that prominent program. Right. But for them to get to the national championship and lay the egg they did, I mean, what do you think that does for the conference now?
I think it's one of these situations where now perception is starting to become reality. And we can get lost in a lot of these kind of like hyperbolic statements of, oh, well, the SEC is the greatest and whatnot. And people around the country will start to roll their eyes at that, and then they'll point out, they'll pigeonhole and cherry pick certain situations where the SEC didn't look all that great. They'll talk about an Auburn or an LSU or whoever, and then games like this happen, and then situations like this bowl season happens where your Big 12 champion and your Big 12 runner-up play two teams out of the SEC and lost by a combined score of 110-27. That is TCU against Georgia, and that is Alabama against K-State. Now, you have a certain situation to me where, yes, they will get beaten up and bludgeoned a little bit. The Big 12 will, and probably deservedly so. But they're, as you mentioned, they're about to lose two of their powers to the SEC, two of the power programs to the SEC. This doesn't. I'll say this: the expansion is coming at a good time, because if not, I mean, are they that much better than the American Conference right now? I mean, like I'm not really trying to make light or make fun of them, and I have a lot of respect for the Baylors and Texas Techs of the world, but to me, they're so far away from where the SEC is right now, where your champion and your runner-up are getting blasted in these final games.
Yeah, that's very true. So that maybe a shaky future for the Big 12. Want to talk about the Bulldogs. Stetson Bennett, kind of the storybook quarterback in college football. A year ago, last season, they didn't want him to be starting.
Yeah.
JT Daniels was their guy.
Yep.
Stetson Bennett won him a national championship. There was still, I think, a few people going into this year who was like, why is Stetson Bennett our quarterback? Mm-hmm. These Georgia fans. And here he goes again, back-to-back national championships, and really a phenomenal game from Stetson Bennett last night. He saw the field so well last night.
Yeah, he was very crisp with his throws. I mean, for a lot of people that don't necessarily pay a whole lot of attention to Georgia football, because you might not get as interested in a lot of their Eastern opponents, you might not get interested in their blowouts against non-conference opponents, whether it's teams like Kent State or teams like Oregon. I think what he showed last night was, yeah, he's got a dog in him. He's got that quarterback kind of dog in him. He's got swagger's an overused term right now, but he does have a lot of that, and he has just such a belief in himself.
Yeah.
And that belief in himself has to go elsewhere. It has to go to his coaches. It has to go to his teammates. And I feel like because of that, he garners their respect. And there's been a lot of talk about it, and I'm glad these stories are coming out where he had to go the JUCO route. Then he had to go back and tell the coaches, I am good enough to be the starter of this team. They had to tell him, no, you're not. You're a 3. He's like, no, I'm not. I'm a starter.
Yeah.
And he had to convince them because he had that much belief in himself. There is, to me, a really redemptive story, not as it relates to football, as it relates to life, about what belief in self can do. And I think everybody at some level, if you have any kind of dreams or goals or aspirations, you can look at a story like that and you can continue to prove to not only yourself, but people around you that you deserve what you deserve. And now he joins a very, very short list of people who've been the starting quarterback of back-to-back national championship teams. Won't happen very often. Hasn't happened very, very much in the history of college football. And it did happen not because he's a 5-star, because of whatever he has deep inside. And you can't measure that or see that.
Yeah. And at SEC Media Days, I talked with Buck Ballou. He was the Georgia quarterback in 1980 when they won the national championship. And I asked him, I said, what in Stetson Bennett, and this was even before this year. Mm-hmm. I said, what in Stetson Bennett, got him to the national championship. And I was thinking he was going to talk about qualities of quarterback, his skill. He said, no, it's his perseverance.
Yeah.
Like this kid didn't stop when everybody wanted him to stop.
Right.
And hearing that from a guy who has won a national championship as a quarterback, I thought, wow, that says a lot about what Stetson Bennett, and then what Stetson Bennett was able to do this year and go out and win another championship the way he did. And so Stetson Bennett had a chance to speak with the media after the game last night. We have a chance to listen to some of that now.
Yeah, he talked a little bit about that growth, and he also had a message for guys, and I think this is really inspiring. Guys like him that might be underdogs, might be under-recruited, and the growth and what you kind of have to do as a quarterback in that situation.
When I was growing up, you still got to be the best, right? Like it doesn't matter if people doubt you. People doubt me. Well, you got to be good. Right. I mean, I always I enjoyed, growing out my hair, wearing glasses, and then going and winning the camp. Like that was, my thing. So, if you are an under-recruited guy, you are soak that up, but like you still got to be the best. Go be spiteful out there. Be a dog. Like you got to.
Stetson Bennett from post-game last night as he led another Georgia team to a national championship this morning. Kirby Smart had a chance to address the media, accept all the trophies and awards that come with winning the national championship. But now it's time to take this and kind of build on what's to come for this Bulldog program.
Yeah, we've heard Nick Saban talk about this a lot, about the complacency and how the natural instinct for humans is to settle in. And he even mentioned that he does that every now and again. He has to kind of remind himself about where he is. But he talked a little bit about his team's resiliency and kind of some of the things that this program will need to do as they move forward, as they take that next step in order to really build. Obviously, they have a championship program, but one that stays here for a really long time.
I'm concerned about our season, and next year I'll be thinking about that the entire flight home and things we can do right now. Like what's important now, right? WIN, that's our motto. And I know people think that's like unheard of, but you actually have to. There'll be time to take off. It's just not today because decisions are imminent. We have several people on our team who stuck it out. Like they didn't have to. They could have said, I'm going in the portal. We had several guys that said, Coach, I'd like to go in the portal. I'm going to go in the portal, but I want to win a national championship. And, that makes me want to cry because they did it for the team over themselves, and that makes me really proud. So, that time is now for them because the portal is a real thing. It's a vehicle to go somewhere else where you can be successful. And we had some guys make sacrifices to do that, so I think that's pretty cool.
Kirby's smart there. He's I don't think he'll have any problem getting guys to come play in his program after the last 2 years, and I don't see Georgia going anywhere. But certainly they are sitting at the top as we speak right now after winning the last 2 national championships. We will talk more about this big win for Georgia with Chris Gordy of the Locked On SEC podcast. We will do that coming up next. We roll through this Tuesday afternoon. Fox Sports 102.9. Chase Robinson, Gerhard Mathengani. We are here as we are recapping the big Georgia win last night for their second straight national championship. And we have got the host of the Locked On SEC podcast, Chris Gordy, joining us now. Chris, always great to talk with you. How are you today?
Well, doing good, man. It's a little depressing that the college football season's over now, but no, that was pretty impressive what Georgia did last night.
It sure was. And once again, another championship for the SEC. What does that say for all those folks that said maybe the SEC, isn't as strong, is not going to stay at the top forever? Another championship for the Southeastern Conference.
Yeah, I think there's a weird dynamic going on here. Like, I've seen a lot of people that used to say, we used to talk about the SEC dominating in conference championships or conference title games. And, it really goes back to LSU kind of got this thing started, if you want to go back to the early 2000s in 2003. And then, it was USC and Texas for a little bit. And then Florida had their 2 championships. LSU had another one in 2007. And then Bama started with their run, I think, in 2009, and so on and so forth. And the narrative for a little while was, it's just Bama. It's not the SEC, it's just Bama. Well, then we had a few things where, Auburn got to a couple, and then, of course, 2019, LSU gets one, and now we've seen Georgia. And now I'm starting to see the narrative flip, and people go, it's not the SEC, it's just Georgia. It's just Georgia dominant. So what pisses me off about that is, like, we completely gloss over what LSU did in 2019. And I think what's going to happen here is, yes, is Georgia set up for ultimate domination and success over the next couple of years? Yes. Is Alabama, Nick Saban, not going anywhere? Sure. They'll bounce back. They'll probably be in the picture again very soon. But, like, what this opens the door for is, what if Josh Heupel takes that next step next year and Tennessee has a chance to get into the playoff? What if, Hugh Freeze starts to lay a foundation at Auburn? So, the point being, like, when we talk about SEC dominance, yes, right now it looks like it's all Georgia. A couple years ago it looked like it was all Alabama, but there are still other programs in this conference that can jump up and have the potential to jump up and have a championship win. So it still is very much SEC dominance. And again, like we talk about, the last 4 years, the SEC has won the national championship, and only one of them was the same team. I think that's what's so impressive to me. And I would be optimistic if I'm a Tennessee fan, if I'm, even maybe a Kentucky fan. Maybe they break through. And, of course, with the playoff expanding after next year, going to 12 teams, I think it's going to open the door even more for other SEC programs to have a chance to go on a magical run. So, it was already the best conference in America, and that's just solidified even more with yet another SEC championship win. And again, kudos to Kirby and Georgia and what they built there. It's incredible.
No doubt. Chris, Gerhard here. As you frame this Georgia team and as you think about what this specific team was able to do and accomplish and be able to go undefeated, in light of these recent championship run here of the teams we've probably, I feel like every year we keep saying that's the best blank we've seen. Georgia last year's defense and the 18 or 19 LSU offense and several others. As you frame this Georgia team in relation to what we've seen in this current little bracket run of the SEC, where do you rank them? And kind of where do you see this team and where do you think their lasting memory is going to be?
Well, look, it was a fantastic year, and they topped what they did a year ago, right? I mean, last year's team lost the SEC championship game. This team went undefeated in the SEC, won the SEC title, and won the college football playoff. So, it's an even more impressive feat. But I still think last year's team was more talented. When you talk about Jordan Davis and all the different pieces that you had on that team last year. It's no knock on this year's team. It just means this year's team maybe had a little bit easier path, maybe a little bit easier road to hoe, and maybe that experience just paid off in a lot of different positions. It's funny, they always talk about at LSU. LSU's 06 team was more talented than their 07 team, but their 06 team didn't win a championship. The 07 team did. It's no knock on the team that won. It's just saying that 06 team had like Jamarcus Russell and all these different talented guys that weren't on the championship team. But, it is pretty impressive to look at this team and what they were able to accomplish. And, really their only close games they played, the comeback win at Missouri, the game against Kent State where they didn't play their best, and that weird game at Kentucky where, there was no offense and they kept settling for field goals and, got out with a 16-6 win. Outside of that, the Ohio State game in the semifinal was really the only other close game they had all year. Every other game they had was just dominating and putting teams away. So I think that was pretty impressive. And really the story of last night to me that stands out is, man, how many true freshmen stood out from Bear Alexander to Michael Williams to, Malachi Starks. Like, you start to see a foundation here, and you go, my God, these are kids who were just recruits in this incoming recruiting class. Like, and they got these guys for 2 more years. It's absolutely filthy that they have to. Brock Bowers has to play another year of college football. He's already exerted himself last year and this year as the best tight end in all college football. Yet he gets to come back another year for them. It's an embarrassment of riches. And I don't know if you guys have looked at Georgia's schedule for the next year already, but it's a little bit of a joke. I mean, they don't even play a good non-conference game. They're going to be undefeated going into that last second to last week of the season where they go to Knoxville to play Tennessee. And if they win that one, they're right back in this thing again and going for a three-peat.
Yeah, for sure. Chris Gordy joining us, host of the Locked On SEC podcast. You mentioned all the freshmen on the field, and Kirby has done, a great job recruiting. He's a great recruiter. He's brought in these guys. He, didn't bring a ton out of the portal for this team after losing so many guys to the NFL, to graduation. What do you think that says about Kirby and what he has built in Georgia? Just the fact the way he's recruited and after losing so many guys, being able to win back-to-back.
Well, you learn from the best. I mean, you learn from Nick Saban, and we don't rebuild, we reload. If you talk to some realistic Georgia fans, like I got a couple of buddies who are diehard Georgia fans, when I talked to them back in the spring, they no lie, their expectation, this is what they told me. They said, look, we lost all these guys to the draft. We'll probably go through the SEC, lose to Bama in the SEC title game, and go to the Sugar Bowl. Like, that was what, most realistic Georgia fans were expecting. I don't know if a lot of them thought, man, yeah, we lost all those guys, but hey, we're going to run the table and go undefeated and win a championship. I don't know. I don't think there were many realistic Georgia fans that thought that way. But kudos to Kirby and his staff, man. I mean, they've proven this year, like, okay, the defense maybe wasn't as talented as last year's crew, but I feel like this offense took it to another level. We saw Stetson Bennett throwing it a little bit more, airing it out, hitting those receivers. Arian Smith coming up big in the semifinal game. I mean, it was a little bit more of an inventive offense this year, and I just give them credit for being able to evolve and never rest on your laurels and expect dominance and excellence. And that's what was so funny about the pregame last night when Kirby said, aggressive. We want to be aggressive. And that team was aggressive last night, so much so that they were talking about, people were doubting us. And I'm looking around going, who the hell doubted this Georgia team? Like, what are you talking about? Like, everybody thought you were going to win it all. So it's just funny. Kirby's got that Saban mentality where he's able to turn it on him and make it feel like, hey, guys, you're not the hunters. You're the hunted. People are coming for you. You better show up and ready to go. And I thought it was amazing what he did from playing that game against Ohio State where they didn't play their best to really playing with their best last night. I thought they corrected all their mistakes. And outside of one busted coverage breakdown that led to points for TCU, they played a superb game outside of that one play.
Yeah, no doubt. I think part of the reason why they are holding on to this crutch, and it can be like a straw man argument that, oh yeah, everybody thought that, we'd be 7-5. I heard some nonsense like that coming from them. I think part of that is because of Stetson Bennett and his role, and the starting quarterback just was kind of seen as this underdog guy. Now, as his career is finished, where do you see him? I hate to keep asking you like historical questions and like putting this in the context of history, but where do you see Stetson Bennett as far as his lure goes? Not only at Georgia, obviously that's solidified, but in the SEC and the way his story kind of unfolded.
Yeah, I mean, let's run through it real quick. Like, to me, Tim Tebow's run at Florida is, I mean, that's one of the greatest that we'll ever see. The 1 year the 1 year rental of Joe Burrow, the 1 year rental of Cam Newton. Like those are all like the special quarterback performances we've seen in the SEC. But after those guys, I mean, I would put Stetson Bennett somewhere up there because he got the two. I mean, who goes back to back? And I know, we can go back to A.J. McCarron, and yeah, he was good, not great. But I think Stetson Bennett was better than McCarron. I put him above that. So, yeah, wherever you want to rank him, I think he belongs in the conversation. I don't know if there was a moment these last 2 years where we went, my God, you got to see the Stetson Bennett kid. Now, we did that with Joe Burrow. We did that with Cam Newton. We did that with Tim Tebow. So all three of those guys were just special. But I think Stetson falls right behind them. And, yeah, he still is disrespected a little bit. I mean, I had people last night saying, well, how'd that kid make that throw? I mean, watch him as a runner this year. I kept saying that was something to watch last night. When they get in the red zone, they would call designed runs for him. And that kid would get to the edge, and he'd beat stud defensive players, with 4.40 times, and he would beat them to the edge. And that speaks to how good Stetson Bennett is. And so, yeah, does he look like Screech from Saved by the Bell? Is he not the most athletic guy in the world? Sure. But, man, the dude, all he did was go out there and perform at a high level and win, especially these last 2 years, ever since he took over for J.T. Daniels. And you got to give your props to him. You got to respect what he was able to do. One of the greatest college quarterback careers in the SEC.
Yeah, really cool story. Really great stuff what Georgia was able to do. Chris Gordy, you can hear him on the Locked On SEC podcast. You can hear that wherever you listen to podcasts. Chris, always great to talk with you. Always great insight on SEC football. Really appreciate you taking some time with us today.
Sure thing, guys. Anytime.
Thanks,
you.
Chris.
Chris Gordy, Locked On SEC podcast, joins us this afternoon talking national championship. Georgia does it again. The SEC does it again as the greatest college football conference. We will grab a break. More college football talk coming up. Stay with us.
Hi, I'm Dr.
WKXX Live, Fox Sports 102.9. Chase and Gerhard here with you. 256-413-1029 is our phone number as we are amidst our final week of WKXX Live. Friday, as we announced yesterday, will be our last show. And we'll be hitting you with some news later this week on what you will be hearing here on 102.9 FM. But looking forward to spending the next couple of days talking sports with you that we have left here on WKXX Live. We now that college football is officially over, we'll of course still love to talk college football, but we got a lot to talk about right here in the state of Alabama when it comes to college basketball. Auburn is at Ole Miss tonight. I think this is a really important game for Auburn, coming off the win against Arkansas. You don't want to, after a win like that, you don't want to go out and lose to a team who's not as good this year. So I think this is a really important game for Bruce Pearl and the Tigers.
This is a really interesting one because, as you mentioned, Auburn comes in as a team that has struggled a bit on the road this year. They've already lost one game in conference on the road against Georgia. Now they go to Oxford. And Coach Pearl has talked about this a couple of times so far this season. When they went out to Washington, it was the best crowd that they've ever played in front of because of who Auburn was last year.
Yeah.
They were the number one team in the nation last year for a large stretch of it. Ended up as one of the top seeds. Now, I know they didn't, get all their goals, but Auburn basketball is now seen in a different light with Bruce Pearl and with what they've been able to do, making road environments, which are already difficult, even harder. Now, this is an Auburn team that has struggled to score. I know they got a lot, great production offensively in their last game against Arkansas, scoring over 70. But these road environments are going to be tough for the Tigers all year long. They just need to buckle in and just get used to that. Bama's going to have some tough ones too on the road. So, yeah, this one is really interesting. An Ole Miss team that's 0-3 in the conference so far right now. We've already seen them lose once to North Alabama, and that's no beef on North Alabama because that's a really good basketball program. But yeah, this is another difficult one. Late night slate once again. They'll get back to Auburn really late as well today, so it'll be tough for sure. And the betting market is telling you as such because Auburn's only a 1.5 point favorite in the game against a team that hasn't won a conference game yet.
Yeah. So that one coming up tonight there at Ole Miss. Alabama, they are heading to Fayetteville, Arkansas. They've got those Razorbacks that Auburn beat Saturday night. They have got them in Fayetteville tomorrow night. And this is an intriguing game as well. Another road test for Alabama.
Yeah, Arkansas's beat up a little bit, and so this game probably isn't as interesting as it probably would have been if Nick Smith would have been healthy and they would have had a full healthy slate of all their guys. But once again, just like we talked about with Auburn, Bama now is that team, top 5 team in the nation. No matter where you go on the road in this conference and outside of this conference, you're going to get a good crowd. So there's going to be a good crowd tomorrow in Fayetteville. It's always a hard place to win. People might not remember last year's game. I think it was one of the biggest disparities from free throw shooting. I think it was like 43-8 or something, just something insane as far as the free throw attempts for both teams. So getting off to a good start is one thing, but then also, weathering the storm. You can't let teams hang around because Bama will once again, as we talked about with Auburn, have once again a tough game, even though it's a bit of a depleted Arkansas team.
Yeah, here's Nate Oates talking about going on the road tomorrow.
I think, one, we're a better team overall. That helps. I think, two, is we got a mature group that's, understands what type of character it takes to win some tough games. And, I think winning that game at Houston kind of proved that we can play with anybody on the road. I mean, that was a tough environment. They're number one in the country. Are they number one again? Yeah, so obviously they're a good team. They were number one and we beat them. They fell out. Now they're back at number one. So it's a tough game. I just think in order to win those road games like that, you got to be tough. And I think we're a little bit tougher. I think we're a much better defensive team. You go on the road sometimes, you can get some offensive droughts, and your defense has to carry you. And I think our defense is able to carry us a lot more this year.
Nate Oates there as Alabama gets ready to head on the road to Arkansas. Coming up on the show tomorrow as we start at 2 o'clock, Jimmy Dykes, college basketball analyst at ESPN, is going to join us. We've had him on in the past and excited to have him on tomorrow, rather. as he was at Alabama, Kentucky on Saturday. He's actually got Kentucky again tonight. So we'll get a really good glimpse kind of into his thoughts, a great basketball mind into this Alabama team.
Yeah, and I think any guy that has seen Alabama up close, or any person that's seen Alabama up close, will have a pretty good reference point as it relates to other great teams that they've seen. So I'm really excited to hear what Jimmy Dykes has to say about not only this Bama team, but even Auburn's team, what kind of where he thinks that they are, but definitely with Alabama, because it's not too often that we keep saying legitimate championship contender, legitimate championship team. This is a team that has all the pieces to win a championship trophy. From my perspective, it'd be really great to hear it from Jimmy's perspective.
Yeah, for sure. And so he'll join us coming up at 2 o'clock tomorrow to start the show on a Wednesday. But tonight, Alabama is tomorrow, Alabama's at Arkansas. Tonight, Auburn at Ole Miss. And so we can be ready for to cheer on Alabama, Auburn, Jacksonville State in action Thursday. They have a home game there at Pete Matthews Coliseum and Saturday as well. And so the Gamecocks will be looking later this week to get a conference win. It's hard to believe we're sitting here saying Jacksonville State still doesn't have a win in conference play.
Yeah, and they've seemingly lost every which way you can. They have lost when they came out and just shot poorly. Game like Liberty comes to mind, where they only scored 41 points, gave up 70-something. Then they've lost where they had the very hot hand at the beginning of the game, like they did against Bellarmine in their previous contest. Bellarmine came in as the team that ended up winning the conference championship last year in the tournament. JSU won the regular season championship crown, and JSU got out to a really great start, really hot shooting. And the second half, about a 7-minute stretch in the second half, and it was over. And Bellarmine just could not miss, and a hot shooting night, and left JSU once again at the very bottom of the ASUN standings. It is still very early. We're only 4 games into an 18-game conference schedule. So there's still a lot of basketball to be played, but it is we're creeping into must-win situations for JSU basketball.
Yeah, that is for sure. So you can hear Jacksonville State coming up this Thursday and Saturday. We'll have those games for you and preview them as we get closer to those games. Coming up next, as we start hour 2, if you are a Jacksonville State football fan, you'll be excited to know the 2023 schedule has been released from Jacksonville State and the Conference USA. So we will dive into that to start hour 2. We'll also talk some NFL, coaching changes, searches going on across the league. We'll talk about that. More college football talk and get a little baseball talk. But we want to hear from you coming up in hour number 2. As we'll love to get your reaction from last night's national championship and whatever else you want to talk about. 256-413-1029. We'll talk to you after this break. Hour number 2 next. big situations.
And Gerhard Mathangani.
Has the trust of his team. Sounds like the makeup of his team is in a really good space, and I believe that's because of the culture he's curated down there.
For WKXX Live, these guys have you covered from preps to pros and everything in between. Now, let's go inside the Fox Sports 102.9 studio with Chase and Gerhard for WKXX Live.
Hour number 2 on a Tuesday. WKXX Live, Fox Sports 102.9. Chase Robinson, Gerhard Mathangani. We are ready to go for another hour as we spent a lot of the first hour talking about the college football playoff national championship. Georgia 67, TCU 65, TCU 7. Big blowout in Los Angeles. And we'll talk more college football later on. We do invite you to be a part of the show, 256-413-1029. Would love to hear your phone calls today, 256-413-1029. You can call in and be a part of the show. Chat with us this afternoon. As we told you yesterday, this is our final week of WKXX Live. Friday will be our last show. And be sure to listen in for the rest of the week as we have our final week of WKXX Live. We will let you know later in the week what the future holds here for 102.9 FM. Let's go to the phone lines as we start hour number 2. And there's Jeremy. How are you, Jeremy?
I'm good. They don't need to lose, you guys, and they don't need to lose Dan Patrick in the morning. The highlights of the day. That game last night, the only way I got through all 4 quarters was watching ESPN2. Watching the Pat McAfee field pass, that's the only thing that got me through all 4 quarters. Like, I was ready. If I'd have been watching Fowler and Herbstreit, I'd have been wanting to turn it off at the end of the first quarter.
Yeah, when it got to be a blowout, I was like, you know what? At first, whenever all the alternate stuff came on, because at first it was just kind of like 1 or 2 channels, and then it's exploded. Now you could watch the game every which way. I thought it was kind of crazy, but last night was the perfect example of why alternate viewing was actually great. And Jeremy, you hit on it.
It just some of the stuff they said. I mean, they're saying stuff that everybody's sitting at home saying. That was the best part about it. They're not. McAfee doesn't care what ESPN says. If they say, hey, we're never going to let you do game day again, or we're never going to let you do this again, because they're not going to do that because they know that he is ratings right now. They know that everybody that listens to sports, they listen to McAfee because he gets stuff out of players that other guys don't get because he was a player. Yep. And just sitting there watching it, if they let him go and say, hey, we're not going to do this again because we don't like some of the jokes and we don't like some of the things you said, that's all right. He'll just go back to calling WWE Friday Night SmackDown.
Exactly.
I mean, he ain't got no problem with that.
And he's on the little YouTube show. I mean, like he made a great name for himself in media. And then now traditional media is basically like, bringing him on the bandwagon. But no, I'm right there with you. He's already created a monster. So why he doesn't really need ESPN. It really helps him out on the back end.
Oh yeah, but just some of the things that they call though, him and AJ Hawk together. Oh my goodness, that's Thursday night. That should be Thursday night college football. Before the pandemic, they had McAfee doing Thursday night football.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
ratings got better because he was making it better. You wanted to sit because he's not sitting there pulling. He's not a homer. You know what I mean? He doesn't have one team that he pulls for just because that's who they should be pulling for. Pat McAfee's pulling for everybody. And last night, listening to him talk, I mean, him and A.J. Hawk pointed out things in that game that Herbstreit and Fowler didn't even think about. And that they see things. They were on the sidelines and they were seeing things different. And that's what made the Georgia-Ohio State game better because I watched it off of the McAfee field pass.
Right.
So,
right.
it was to me, yeah, it was a blowout, but great. Georgia went out there, and once again, you know, we can might as well get it all tattooed. If you live in a Southeastern Conference state, it just means more. And apparently it does, because what does TCU go home with? They're not hanging a Big 12 championship banner. They're not hanging a national championship banner.
Yeah.
Fiesta Bowl.
I mean, that's all you get, the Fiesta Bowl against Michigan. I mean, everybody could have had the Fiesta Bowl against Michigan. I mean, and I'm not saying Alabama would have did any different than Michigan or Ohio State if they were in it, but I guarantee you that would have been a whole lot closer of a ball game, better of a ball. Might not have been as close. It may not have been closer, but it would have been a better viewing experience.
Yeah, easily
than what we had last night.
Easily. I'm right there with you. I think that, I mean, if you would have had any SEC team in Bama, healthy Tennessee, I mean, we would have had, obviously would have been a lot better in my opinion. But and at the same time too, I hope that this becomes a kind of cautionary tale, so to speak, as it relates to the committee when they're announcing their teams, and then in the future when they're announcing their seedings. Like the third SEC team that gets in, if that third SEC team that gets in deserves a 4 seed or a 5 seed, give them that. Don't give them the 9, 10, 11, or 12 just because of the third SEC team in. Because this can carry on as we go a little bit further. Now, obviously, people are talking about the expansion. They got one more year of the playoff, I believe. It's just, to me, to me, this should be the most glaring light of, hey, let's make sure we get this 4-team thing right.
Well, and next year, just watch what'll happen. This won't happen again, because the reason why it happened last year with Cincinnati and this year with TCU was they were the sacrificial lambs, so to speak. They were the ones that they're saying, hey, we need to get these guys in to show why we need a 12-team playoff. I believe that's why they did it. They left Alabama out to show we need a 12-team playoff. They left Tennessee out. They left out some pretty good teams, and I'm okay with some of them being left out. But now that we're going to that 12 team here in 2 more years, imagine. Let's think about these first round games. Let's think about these first round games at home.
Yeah.
A playoff game at home. I mean, you get one at. I don't know. I think you can have one at Bryant-Denny. Don't know if you will or not, but there's a possibility that you have one at Bryant-Denny. Imagine Bryant-Denny or Jordan-Hare on a Saturday playoff game.
Oh, yeah. I've been to a bunch of JSU playoff games, or no, I say a bunch, I mean a handful of them, and that's the FCS playoffs. And that atmosphere is unbelievable.
Yeah.
It's spine-chilling. So I couldn't imagine, once you get to the FBS level and you're playing for a championship and you have one of those games at your place, I'm sure it's going to be unbelievable. It's going to be like the NFL.
Yeah, there'll be banners that says it means more everywhere. I mean, everywhere you turn in any SEC school, it's going to mean more.
Yep.
The thing that I took out of last night, though, I called it, and then this morning, first thing, Dan Patrick calls it out, and someone makes mention that Stetson Bennett reminds them of Drew Brees. Sitting there watching the ball game last night, texting with some buddies, I went, if he had the birthmark and his hair was different, he kind of looks like Drew Brees. And then, I never did put it together. He does kind of have a Drew Brees' play to him. So I don't think he's going first round. Stetson won't be a first rounder, but I think Stetson will go maybe 3 or 4. He's going to be that. I don't think he's going to be Mr. Irrelevant either.
No,
but I think he'll make a great quarterback for somebody. And here's the thing, we talked about Sean Payton going to the Broncos and bringing in Drew Brees. Man, what if they draft Stetson Bennett?
Draft Stetson Bennett and Jim Harbaugh will be their coach.
Yeah. Because he's already on record calling Stetson Bennett the best quarterback in the college football this year. So take that as Michigan's quarterback going to the locker room, looking at his coach, going, "Hey, what am I?" and because he really wasn't that great of a quarterback anyway. But Stetson Bennett was the cream of the crop this year. I know Caleb Williams won the Heisman, but I don't think he deserved the Heisman. He playing in the Pac 12, 11 and a half, whatever they want to call it. You know, he was not in a great league to do it. If Caleb Williams would have been in the Southeastern Conference on any team, he wouldn't have had the year that he had. It's just the competition. You play to the level of the competition. Cream rises to the top, and when you don't have any cream in your division, you're mediocre at best.
Yep.
And all the cream is in the SEC, and it's in the somewhat in the ACC and the Big Ten. That's your three major conferences from here on out.
I agree, and at the same time too, I think we're getting to this a huge money divide too, because you have the Big Ten who just signed this ridiculous media deal. You have the SEC who's also inked into their media deal. So those two are solidified, and those two are expanding, getting four of the best programs ever: Texas, Oklahoma, USC, and UCLA. To me, the gap is only going to get wider between these conferences. It's not going to. It's not going to shrink, in my opinion.
Right. And what good did the ACC network do for them? I mean, really, honestly, basketball. That's the only thing that I've seen it do any good for. Because during the football season, it's all Clemson. It's, all of Clemson's non-conference games are going to be on the ACC network. All of their lower matched games are going to be on the ACC network. I mean, quite honestly, they should have just did like Texas and had it the Clemson Tiger Network and not like the Longhorn Network, because ACC Network, it really hasn't done anything for them. And financially, it's not a juggernaut like SEC Network is.
No, it's certainly not. And I know that in the basketball payout really isn't as much as it could be. And all their, as you mentioned, all their big games are, taken up. I know it's largely under the same ESPN umbrella, but it's largely being taken up by, the bigger network. Anytime that it's the ranked Clemson against the ranked Florida State or whatever the case is, like it's never just, a great, there's not one time where I've turned on a TV on a Saturday and said, oh, I got to turn on to the ACC network because it's this team versus this team. I've never had that once ever.
Exactly. It's usually a replay of a game because nothing else is on television, and it's 2-3 o'clock in the morning. I think that college football this next year, the look Saban gave David Pollock last night when he called out and said that Georgia was, college football, that they were the team, the look he gave him, you better believe he's walking into that locker room, and that right there, that clip, it's going to be up there on that screen along with the Tennessee LSU loss.
Oh, yeah.
It's going to be right there with it. I mean, David Pollock's a Georgia boy, and he's sitting there fueling the fire that is Nick Saban. I mean, you don't give Nick Saban anything like that. Saban's going to take that, and he's going to go in. Look, Georgia didn't have to go through Alabama this year. They didn't even have to worry about Alabama this year. And that, take that how you want to take it. You can say that if they had to play Alabama, that they wouldn't be playing for a national championship, or they wouldn't have been number one going into the playoff. But when Alabama's the team that you have to go through, just ask LSU and just ask Tennessee and just ask some of these other schools and ask Georgia. Georgia's had to try to go through Alabama. And Alabama is reloading. This was their down year. Nick Saban said that the year they went to the national championship was a rebuilding year. This, to me, was more of a rebuilding year than anything.
So who do you think wins the national championship next year? What's Jeremy's 364-day away prediction of the 2023-2024 national champion?
The 365 way too early.
Yeah.
I think Ohio. let me give you my top 4. I think Ohio State will be in it again. I do not believe that Michigan will be in it again because I believe Michigan's going to lose a lot with this whole Harbaugh disaster that's going on. And I think that if there was going to be another Penn State, like maybe Penn State, but Ohio State, Alabama, Georgia, and either Penn State or Florida State. But I think that the national championship will be Georgia, Alabama.
Okay.
And I want to say Alabama. I want to say Alabama could win it because they've got a lot. They've got a great class coming in, and they've got a lot of great guys returning that's got the fire. And I think that that's going to be big because Georgia's going to be tough because Georgia's got a lot of freshmen that played incredible last night.
Yeah.
So, last night was called the second half was called the Georgia Spring Game, and that they called that last night, and it was. You got guys in there that next year that you can't say, oh well, they don't have like championship experience. They don't have this. Well, they do now. They've got that experience because they got to play in the national championship last night.
Yeah. To me, it'll be really interesting, especially because Alabama and Georgia are replacing the starting quarterbacks. That, to me, makes it the interesting thing. But, I mean, if you look at Alabama, whether it's Milroe, whether it's any one of these guys that they had signed or or somebody else, enters the mix, that'll be really interesting. But I think whoever is the quarterback at Alabama has tons of talent around them. Whoever's the quarterback at Georgia, it looks like it's going to be Carson Beck, the sophomore. You still got Brock Bowers as the tight end, and as Chase has said a bunch of times this year, probably the best weapon in college football.
He's going to become the new Hunter Renfrow, or what's the other kid, the Shipley kid that's there, where you go, how many years is this kid going to be at this school? Because I think here in about 6 years, we're going to be talking about Bowers again, going, well, here he is in the national championship again. How long does he get? I mean, he's going to be on the Stetson Bennett scholarship program where he's there till he's 25.
I sincerely think that if he was eligible this year, he'd be a first-round draft pick.
He would. And here's the thing. I'm so glad that the NCAA does not allow one and done in college football. That's the reason why college football, that's why it's so much better than the basketball side of college sports. Because college sports with the one and done, and that's why the NBA is not the NBA that we once saw. And it's because of the one and done, because you got young kids coming to the NBA that didn't prove themselves, that don't look good. That's why in college football, you get 3 years to go out there and prove that you know what you're doing, and you grow and you learn. And then when you make that step up to the NFL, that's why the product looks better. That's why the NFL and college football are your number 1 and 2 most watched athletic events in the United States. Yeah,
I agree. And to me, they have a really good marriage because mostly these Brock Bowers, these Trevor Lawrences, most of those are outliers. Guys that were ready for the NFL probably as a sophomore, as a true sophomore ready for the NFL. Yeah. That's the outlier. You got to be a grown man to play in the NFL. The thing about the NBA is a lot of these guys will leave college basketball early, and then you'll see them. It takes 2 or 3 years to develop to be a great pro player. Exactly. And a lot of these guys aren't ready at 18, 19 years old. It's just, and now hopefully with NIL, you're incentivized to stay around in college a little bit longer because you can make a little bit of money and you don't necessarily have to run to the pros, and you can go to the pros and you're ready.
Well, what is this? What grade is this wide receiver in? The McCluskey kid. Is that his name?
Oh,
the one that kept
McConkey.
Yeah, McConkey. I think
McConkey.
Is he a redshirt sophomore? I want to say he's eligible to go, but he's still a younger guy.
Yeah, something like that.
I don't think he'll go. I think he'll stay if he's got another year. I think he'll stay because he seems like he needs another year. Because to be honest with you, I haven't heard anything about him until the national championship last night. I mean, even during the the Ohio State game, I really don't remember them talking much about him. Which they didn't talk much about Powers, except for the fact that he didn't get as many targets in the semifinal game as he did last night.
Yeah.
But going at him, hey, they gave him targets, buddy. They went after him early, and he was catching everything that they threw at him.
Definitely. Yeah, he's a sophomore. He's a sophomore. Just looked it up.
See, that's amazing. So next year, I mean, Georgia, the East and the West is a two-team. I mean, it's a two-team thing. I mean, I'm gonna be honest with you. I honestly feel that the Tennessee LSU games with Alabama. I mean, I think we all can look at those games and say, "Hey, that's just we got unlucky twice." Because if you look at those games, Alabama could have won both of those games. It was uncharacteristic mistake under a Saban team that cost them those ball games. And if it would have been the normal Saban team, we'd be talking about an undefeated Alabama going into the SEC championship to play an undefeated Georgia, and both of them would have been in the playoff, despite the result of the SEC championship game.
Yeah, I'm right there with you, and that's exactly what you and I both had in our preseason picks. Chase and I both. It was September 1st when we made those predictions that both Georgia and Alabama would be undefeated going into the SEC championship game.
Well, and I think that there's a chance that can happen again next year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because Georgia's got Auburn in September. And so they'll get them out of the way. They'll give Auburn one of their losses. Alabama's probably going to roll over them, I think. But be honest with you, I don't think Auburn is loading up. I don't think they're building they're going to have to get a hold of NIL or a transfer portal or something, because that recruiting class was not impressive to me. I mean, they've got some great guys that they're bringing in, but it wasn't a recruiting class that you would expect from Auburn that they've had in the past.
No, and they were working behind the eight ball too. I don't think Brian Harsin helped them out all that much on the recruiting trail.
I think who's going to hurt the most this next year is Michigan. I think all this stuff going around with Jim Harbaugh right now, I think he's destroying a foundation there at Michigan, and Michigan might fall back into some hard times again. And Ryan Day's career at Ohio State may get saved next year, because I don't see Michigan beating Ohio State 3 years in a row.
No, I don't either. I really don't. Jeremy, we got to jump to a break. Really appreciate your call, and we'll talk to you hopefully again some more this week.
Oh, yeah. Y'all guys have a good one, and go Braves.
Go Braves. Appreciate the call.
Thanks, Jeremy.
You can give us a call as well, 256-413-1029. We'll take more phone calls on the other side of this break.
Not completing high school.
WKXX Live, Fox Sports 102.9, Chase and Gerhard. As we roll through this Tuesday afternoon on our, I guess this is our farewell tour. You know, some coaches wait till after the end of the season to announce their retirement, announcing it's over. Or you can be like Coach K and come up before the season, so everybody acknowledges when you come to their court to the final time. We're kind of taking the Coach K approach. This is our farewell tour this week on WKXX Live. Friday will be our last show, and we'll let you know towards the end of the week what the future looks like here on WKXX. But we will have Jacksonville State football on the air no matter what happens here on WKXX. We'll be your home for Jacksonville State football, as it's going to look a little different. The schedule was released today, and as you and I were looking through this schedule before coming on the show, it just looks kind of weird because there's a Thursday, there's a Wednesday, there's a couple of Tuesdays, and we're playing college football.
Yeah, it's a situation where we knew it was coming when Conference USA announced a partnership with CBS Sports, and they have a multi-network deal, multi-platform deal. We knew it was going to be some midweek games, but then seeing it in the flesh and JSU releasing the schedule today with Conference USA finalizing the schedule, it is weird to see Tuesday, Wednesday there on the schedule, but lo and behold, here we are. Rich Rodriguez and his crew will have to prepare for some really odd days as far as game days go.
Yeah, and you look at this schedule, and it's just different altogether. The days and the teams, for so long I say we, as in Jacksonville State. Jacksonville State was in the OVC,
right. So
we knew we had Tennessee Tech and State and Belmont and Eastern Illinois and all these teams on there, and then we moved to the A-Sun, so you had Kennesaw and Lipscomb and some of these other teams, Austin P on the schedule. But now, as we move into Conference USA and Division I, it's all these teams that I know nothing about, that we're not used to watching, and so it's going to be different from that as well. I mean, starting off, so all Conference USA is going to start off with week 0. So this will be the 4th time in 6 years Jacksonville State will open up week 0, and they will be hosting UTEP, University of Texas at El Paso. So Jacksonville State hosts UTEP to get things going there on August 26th.
Yeah, a big game for JSU to start off. I mean, like, it's one thing to change conferences. It's another thing to change conferences. In your very first game, you have a conference game. It's one of two on that day, with FIU and La Tech being the other one. So you'll know early on off the bat if JSU will go 1-0 in the new conference or 0-1.
Yeah, and then Saturday, September 2nd, Jacksonville State back at Burgess Snowfield. They'll host East Tennessee State. That is an out-of-conference game, so a non-conference game in week 2. Then Saturday, September the 9th, Jacksonville State goes to Coastal Carolina, a team who's made a name for themselves. Of course, Jamie Chadwell has moved on to Liberty, who's on the schedule in a few weeks after that, but Coastal Carolina's made a name for themselves.
They certainly have. They were ranked both last season and before inside the year. I believe Grayson McCall, I'm going to look this up. Didn't he come back to, I think he came back to Coastal Carolina. Let me make sure. He went to the transfer portal, and then I believe he ended up deciding to end up coming back to Coastal Carolina. So if so, that would be a great quarterback. One of the nation's best quarterbacks that'll be back. Yeah, it looks like he did decide to return to the Shanta Clears. And
boy.
So yeah, it'll be a team, as you mentioned, they have a little cachet about them with a quarterback that's expected to be one of the top guys in the draft.
Yeah, so Jacksonville State to Coastal Carolina on September the 9th. Then Saturday, September the 16th, Jacksonville State is off. Saturday, September the 23rd, Eastern Michigan comes to Jacksonville State.
I think this is an interesting situation, interesting game here, or particularly because you have Sam Houston, who was a member of the FCS for a really long time, and now they're conference foes once again. Not many people will know much about Eastern Michigan. I think that game will be one of those kind of interesting games, but the fact that it's homecoming will get a lot of people out. I don't think that the name just in general will get a lot of people out, but the fact that it's homecoming, you'll get some people back. And then that Sam Houston game, two teams that share like Liberty, we'll talk about in a little bit, that shared some time in the FCS, now going to the FBS.
Yeah, so Thursday, September 28th, Jacksonville State at Sam Houston. And here's where we, in the month of October, when you just get ready for some weeknight football, as Wednesday, October 4th, Jacksonville State goes to Middle Tennessee.
It just even seeing it is still a little bit weird. But yeah, this does start the conference slate. If you're a fan of Jacksonville State, get ready for your Octobers to be weird, because all these games will be midweek games, and this is not just JSU. This is not isolated to JSU. This is all the other teams in conference, and you'll be able to get some Thursday night national coverage, national TV coverage games. It's part of the reason why they have this situation lined up. So yeah, between that Sam Houston game on September 28th, it's a 1 day short week as far as the overall weakness of the overall week is concerned for prep. Middle Tennessee in Murfreesboro.
Yep, and that is Wednesday, October 4th. The following week, on Tuesday, October 10th, this is going to be a good one. The Liberty Flames come to Jacksonville State.
Yeah, so Liberty coming back to the state of Alabama, where their head coach is now, their old head coach is now down the road at Auburn. But Liberty is expected to once again have a really good football team. And Hugh Freeze has done a great job there recruiting. So expect another really good team to come back. And I'll be interested to see whenever the preseason polls come out. Won't be a bit surprised to see if Liberty is right there at the top.
Yep, and then they'll have 2 straight Tuesday night games. So the following Tuesday, October 17th, Western Kentucky comes to Jacksonville State.
Another really good football program. Tyson Helton, one of the best coaches right now. As far as the coaches that are named as, these guys that have kind of revolutionized their program. And Western Kentucky's always been good.
Oh, yeah.
I feel like this is one of those programs. They know they're kind of a stepping stone program for these guys to get another job, but they've always hired well. They've always kind of hired the right guy, so to speak, and they did so hit another home run with Helton.
Yes, and so that is on October 17th. Then Wednesday, October 25th, Jacksonville State makes the trip down to Florida International.
The FIU's always been an interesting program. JSU and FIU have always had a nice little rapport with one another. They play each other in a lot of different sports. Basketball is one that comes to mind. Baseball is one that comes to mind. And now in football. So JSU is really familiar with that area, whether it's FAU or FIU down there in South Florida.
Yeah.
And they'll go to Miami in that matchup.
And then, so just in October, we'll have weeknight games. November, we'll crank back up with Saturday. And the month of November is not going to be easy for the Gamecocks, because on November 4th, they travel to Williams-Brice Stadium as Rich Rod will take on Shane Beamer.
Yeah, and, the way South Carolina ended their year this year, it seems like a really scary proposition. But, of course, no Spencer Rattler, and South Carolina will look a lot different. But, yeah, it'll be interesting to see. You and I talked to Greg Seitz earlier in the year and said it's a little bit easier to actually get these games on the schedule now against Power 5 opponents. So that'll be a big one against South Carolina. And how about this? A really weird, you don't hear Gamecocks too often. But that game, it'll be Gamecocks versus Gamecocks in a really interesting. I wonder if I'll go look it up to see if that's the first time Gamecocks and Gamecocks, because it's just two unique names.
That's very true. Saturday, November the 18th, Louisiana Tech comes to Jacksonville State. Saturday, November 25th, the Gamecocks will finish up the season on the road at New Mexico State. So they'll go across the country. And then the Conference USA Championship game will be either on Friday, December the 1st, or Saturday, December the 2nd. That date still to be determined. But for Jacksonville State, there's, I believe, six home games.
Believe so, yes. Because you got to count the Eastern Tennessee, the Eastern Michigan game. That's right.
Mm-hmm. 6. Yep, 6 home games. You'll be able to see the Gamecocks. A couple of those on a weeknight.
Yep.
A couple on Saturdays. So just 4 this year because of construction, projected construction stuff going on.
Right.
But 6 home games at Burgess Snow next year.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And the fact that a lot of these games will be conference games, like including the opener. You don't really get that a lot. Normally JSU has been able to play a UAB or somebody in Montgomery, or play a week 0 game, or play early, but it's a non-conference game. To start out out of the slate with a conference game, I think that'll bring an energy in and of itself. And so not only getting the 6 home games and kind of a quote unquote normal schedule,
right?
A lot of those games will be conference games, which I think is really important. I think only one of them is a non-conference game against Eastern Michigan, also East Tennessee State. The second game of the season is a non-conference game as well. So it'll be really interesting. And think of the last 4 weeks for JSU, 3 of them on the road, at Miami, at South Carolina against Columbia, or in Columbia against South Carolina, and then New Mexico State. I mean, road warriors there, and they're traversing the stateside part of the country here from Miami to Las Cruces, New Mexico.
Yes, you're right about that. So Jacksonville State 2023 Conference USA schedule is out for the Gamecocks. We will grab a timeout here, come back. More to come on this Tuesday afternoon. It's WKXX Live, Fox Sports 1029.
So you need a new
WKXX Live, Fox Sports 102.9, Chase and Gerhard. Rolling through a Tuesday with you. 256-413-1029 is our phone number if you'd like to give us a call. I got a question to pose to you, Gerhard, that I want us to discuss for a second. Just thinking about last night's national championship game, this year's Georgia team. I'm going to list 3 teams off to you. I want you to tell me which one you think is the best.
Okay.
2019 LSU, 2020 Bama, and 2022 Georgia. All national champions, all out of the SEC. Which of those do you think the better team?
To me, it's a really, really tight race between the 19 LSU and 20 Alabama. And I think I got 20 Alabama edging them out. 20 Alabama did not get the chance, in my opinion, to play, obviously, because we had COVID and we were in the pandemic, only an SEC only schedule, which actually kind of made that more impressive, in my opinion.
Yeah.
The run that they ended up having. You take a look at what they were able to do on both sides of the ball. That LSU offense was just so overwhelming. I know their defense was good, but the LSU offense was so overwhelming. But to me, Alabama 2020 had such good balance. And if you go across that 2 deep of the 2020 team, it was just littered with guys that would eventually be all pros and pro bowlers and all SEC. The all SEC team was just insane, just packed with Alabama players. To me, if I'm ranking them, Georgia is 3rd. Alabama 2020 is 1st, and right behind them, and I mean just a razor-thin margin between the two, is 2019 LSU.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. I went back to the. I was hoping to find the original 2020 Alabama schedule that included non-conference games.
Right.
I can't find that just off the top search here, but. Just looking at the all-SEC schedule they had, the least amount of points they scored in a game was in the opening game against Missouri, and that was 38.
Right.
But it was 52, 63, 48, 63, 55, 52, 42, 52. They did beat Notre Dame 31-14, and then 52 points on Ohio State in the national championship. I do think that was the best college football team I've seen out of those 3 in a very long time. Just the amount of talent, the amount of points scored, and the way they did it. So, yeah, I would agree.
Yeah, that team was just so, in my opinion, just so overwhelming that at every turn, whether it was defense, whether it was offense, I mean, they had a great special teams that year as well. It was just, to me, just an unbelievable run and just a great run of dominance. Even with Georgia this year, and I'm not trying to act like the Kent State game was their game. It wasn't. They came in, they weren't motivated. But Alabama never had that throughout the course of that season. They just never had that let-up game. They never had a game where they just didn't look like themselves. You can point to a couple of times that Georgia had that. You can point to a couple of times that 2019 LSU had that. You couldn't point to that in the Alabama season. And just the offense they were able to put up and the just the speed on the outside, the fact that they were able to run the football, protect the quarterback, and throw for as many yards as Mac Jones did that year, just unbelievable.
It was truly unbelievable. So definitely some good college football teams coming out of the SEC in recent years, able to win national championships. We talked about Jim Harbaugh a little bit. We've talked about him a little bit lately. But it came out today. He is expected to interview with the Broncos. Do you think that would be a good fit, Jim Harbaugh to Denver?
I want to say no, because it just feels like Jim Harbaugh's personality and Russell Wilson's personality are water and oil.
Yeah.
But I've seen Jimbo make it work with so many other people. So I mean, who's to say that he can't make that work? He is a different kind of guy, and I think that because he's been to a championship, Russell Wilson will respect him. He'll gain respect from the guys in that locker room, hands down. I'm not sure how many Michigan guys they have on there, but I'm pretty sure they have at least some close ties on there. I'm sure Jim Harbaugh was in the living rooms of a lot of the players that are on that Denver Broncos football team, so he knows them to a certain degree, especially some of the guys that were blue chip guys coming out of high school going on to the college level. So to me, he would gain a certain amount of instant respect from the guys in the locker room. Now, how that transpires to the field, I'm not sure. But if the price tag is anywhere what we're hearing, which is anywhere between $12 and $20 million, I just don't see him coming back to Michigan. especially in hindsight of everything that's just happened over there with the sanctions. And I'm not sure how much trouble that actually gets them in the NCAA. I don't see them vacating wins and stuff like that, but maybe some shortened practice times and reduction of scholarships, however the NCAA wants to punish Michigan. But to me, I do see him in the NFL. Denver does seem like a landing spot, but it doesn't to me seem like it's a home run automatically when you just hear it straight up.
So apparently the two guys the Broncos have requested to interview is Sean Payton and Jim Harbaugh.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, that's two good coaches.
Yeah. Yeah. And the guys that you would want to go to.
Yeah.
These are the two of the guys to me that are the best coaches right now that are essentially on the market. One's in television and one's, at a college. I'm not surprised that the Broncos are shooting for the fences on this one. You've already done it with your quarterback. You've already paid him $250 million or whatever that salary is, $200 something million. You got to hit a home run with the coach, and you got to hit a home run with a coach that's done it before with a quarterback. Jim Harbaugh's done it with Colin Kaepernick. He's done it with J.J. McCarthy at the college level. He did it with all kinds of guys. And Sean Payton, of course, did it with Drew Brees. So if I'm Russell Wilson, I think I might want Sean Payton over Jim Harbaugh, but I won't be a bit surprised to see Jim Harbaugh in the NFL. And maybe with his old team, maybe with the Colts, who will be looking for head coach too.
Yeah, that's very true. It is apparent, and this is a great move by the Colts, that they will not go with Jeff Saturday as their permanent head coach. And ESPN apparently is interested in bringing him back as an analyst.
Yeah, he was good.
Yeah, and so that would be a great move. Sean McVay, it came out today that he apparently has told his staff that they can go out and interview for whatever job. He will not block anybody from going out and searching for jobs right now. So that could be an indication that there could be a change coming there in Los Angeles.
Yeah, it looks like that is the case. He seems like a guy that kind of burns the candle at both ends. He is very, very, very plugged into football. He has his championship ring. San Francisco is not going anywhere. His division is going to be very tough. What this means for Matt Stafford, what this means for everybody else in the organization, that part I'm not sure. But they don't have any first-round draft picks because they used them all to go get all these guys. I'm not sure about their salary cap situation, but it doesn't look like they're in such a great place from a salary cap perspective. I could see him taking a year off. I mean, football is a crazy, crazy hard sport, especially at that level with a guy like him and the amount of effort that he puts into it. So if he takes a year off, that is one thing that I wouldn't blame him for. And just like you said, every coaching staff wants continuity, and for the fact that he's telling all of his guys, hey, go talk to colleges, go talk to other pro teams, lets you know that there might be an opening there in LA, which the domino effect of that to me will be really interesting. When you talk about a guy like Matt Stafford, you talk about a guy like Baker Mayfield, who's there now. Yeah. What does it mean for him? It'll be really interesting.
Yep. So that's some other NFL news there that we'll be watching this week is to see who else may be jobs may be open or whatever. But I read an article earlier that Sean McVay, had a chance to maybe do some TV work, get out of coaching, do some TV work this year. Obviously he didn't. He stayed coaching. I think he would be good in the booth. He could have very well. There was several openings across in the NFL. Maybe he could be on Thursday Night Football or the number one on Fox as they were looking for. I think he missed out on that though.
Yeah, I think he'd be great. He'll be great on television, and any network will open up a spot for him, whether it's in the booth or as an analyst on one of those pregame postgame shows. So yeah, his options will be endless once he does make the decision, and it looks like it's looming. It looks like it's coming at any point where he's going to say, "Hey, I want to be I don't want to be a coach for at least 1 year," which will be really interesting to see how it works out on the back end with that as well.
For sure. One more little note before we get out of here this afternoon. Carlos Correa, I think he's on a mission this offseason to try to play for every team in Major League Baseball, but I think he does have a deal with the Minnesota Twins that he's set to sign.
Yeah, and it looks like he's going back to the Twins. Now, this is after 13-year, $315 $50 million deal was brokered with the San Francisco Giants. And then once that fell through because of a physical, then it was a $300 million deal, $315 million deal with the New York Mets. And it looks like that has now fizzled. And so he's going to settle in on a 6-year deal worth $200 million. I wish you could settle in for that much money. Yeah. But yeah, it does look like he's at least been very close to the opening press conference with 3 different teams so far this year. And until pen hits paper, I don't know if you can even count the Minnesota Twins, but it looks like he might be going back to Minnesota. So NL, looks like he's going back to the American League.
Yep. So, but I agree with you. And until his signature is on the paper and it is in the hands of whoever it needs to be in, I'll just wait and see where Carlos Correa is. But that'll be a good pickup by the Twins if they can get him.
Yeah, most certainly. And we talked a lot about the shortstop market this time around because it was so rich, full of talent. Obviously, we kept a keen eye on it here because the Atlanta Braves have had, their run of guys that they've signed, and they didn't sign Carlos Dansby. The Cubs are looking for one. The Cubs ended up getting Carlos Dansby. Then you got solidified deals with Trey Turner as well as Xander Bogaerts. And so Carlos Correa was kind of the big heap. And so you saw the contenders lining up. The Giants wanted to make a splash.
Yeah.
Padres, you looking, maybe they obviously, backed off. The Mets, they've been looking to make splashes everywhere, and they certainly have everywhere. And then now the Twins on the other side of the bracket, so to speak, it looks like they, as a contender, will be getting the services of Carlos Correa once again, which it's home for him.
Right.
He's been there before, so I could see this being a pretty seamless transition.
Yeah, for sure. That is all the time we have today. Join us tomorrow. We will continue our farewell week here on WKXX Live. Final show Friday. Jimmy Dykes joins us at 2 o'clock tomorrow. We'll talk to you then.
The Furniture